Hello again, and welcome to What Nobody Told Me After 65. Today I want to talk to you about the Older Americans Act, or OAA. It was signed into law in 1965, and every year Congress uh, approves the funding for this organization to be signed into law by the president. This is important. Why? Because we need this funding to be increased. Um, the National Center on Aging, which I'm constantly quoting for it is my go-to source. The National Center on Aging works closely with professionals and agencies across the country to address the increasing number and diversity of older Americans who are struggling. There were monies put into place during what we call the pandemic era um, that had to be used, or you would lose it. Um, and these monies, if they're not already gone, they are quickly dissipating. These funds were put in place because they realized we were on lockdown. People couldn't continue to go out, they couldn't work. So many things in the country had changed, and so they had put this money into place for states to be able to help their struggling citizens to stay financially afloat. Some of the monies was used for rental assistance and mortgage payments. As you remember, we had a moratorium on rents. People could not be evicted. But the flip side is now that the money is gone, people are being evicted at a record rate. They're getting kicked out of their homes. They don't have the money to catch up on the back rent. And so it was a sort of a catch 22. People who owned properties weren't getting their monies, they weren't being paid. And people who were living in those units didn't have to leave, they had nowhere to go, they didn't have any money to pay the rent. But you know it was going to come to a head, and now it has. Not only are senior citizens struggling, but young people, young families, single mothers are struggling to stay afloat. It is important to note that the Older Americans Act is critical. I'm going to research more and find out just how much money it has been established for this program. Um, and I'll get back to you. We'll talk about it again. In the meantime, they are talking about cutting it to what it was a year ago, which would cut about 1 million homes, 1 million individuals would not be able to receive those Meals on Wheels. I know it may not be the best food, but in some cases, that's all anybody gets. Some people, that's all the food that they get. So we're talking about 1 million households would be slashed, not be able to receive those meals. That also would represent about 10,000 low income, unemployed people will be dropped from the Senior Community Services Employment Program. These numbers may not mean anything, but in this overall scheme of things, it means a lot, particularly if you're in that group and you are affected. We need to contact our elected officials, need to reach out to them and make your voices heard. It's important. Presidential election year, critical. The way to reach your elected officials, you can go to usa.gov, put in your address, and it's going to give you your elected officials from the federal level all the way down to local. That's important. You need to know who represents you. You need to know who represents you, what they stand for. That is important. Again, contact your elected officials and by going to usa.gov and let them know your concerns. Leave me information in the comments, any questions or suggestions that you might have. Leave them in the comments, and please subscribe and share. But remember, you don't know what you don't know. Thanks for listening.